So for our final talk of the season, we have a chartership workshop. So our speakers tonight, we have Bill Gaskarth, who is our Chartership Officer, and Catherine Isherwood, who is recently chartered and will be able to give her perspective on the process. And AGM following that, as well as any questions, we'll be happy to answer them from the room and online. There's the facility to type in any questions at the end of the talk. So first, I'll introduce Bill Gaskarth to start the talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. Going first is a little bit of a worry because it means that Catherine can start pointing out all the porkies, I tell you. But we'll see how it goes. Anyway, let's talk about what the Society offers. It offers chartership. Chartered Geologist is the main one. But the problem was that quite a number of people who graduate in geology join the Society and then don't work as professional geologists. And this is one of the problems, because geology, you get a degree in geology and you're a geologist for life. So you may be off selling knickers and Marks and Spencers. It doesn't matter. You're a geologist selling knickers and Marks and Spencers. And so consequently, a number of people who are fellows of the Society wanted to remain fellows of the Society, but they couldn't get Chartered Geologist because they weren't working as a practicing professional geologist. And this is where we made a deal with the Science Council to offer Chartered Scientist under license. And so what we can now have, of course, is FGS CSci, which means geologist working as a scientist in the periphery of geoscience. But then FGS CGeol means practicing professional geologist. FGS CGeol CSci means somebody who's got a bigger business card than anybody else. But the point there is that geology is a science, so you can qualify for both. And then the final point there is that the Society was one of the founding members of the European Federation of Geologists, and now there's an agreement with EFG that Chartered Geologist fulfills all the requirements for European geologists, and so basically if you get a few quid extra you can become a Eurogol as well. And the interesting thing about that is you can put that at the front of your name. So you can now be Eurogol, Fred Flange, FGS, CGeol, CSci, turn over and get the rest of the letters. So that's the situation. And it is important, in actual fact, European geologist, in that in Spain and in Italy in particular, there's a lot of regulation of the profession. And consequently, if you've got that European geologist and Chartered Geologist qualification, it's common that you can actually work there quite more easily. And on top of that, we have linked with the American Institution of Professional Geologists and the American Association of Petroleum Geologists. And we've got mutual recognition of qualifications. So if you happened to be sent to the States with your company, then you can join the American institution. And on joining that, you could then immediately become, the Americans call them certified geologists, which is kind of interesting, really, because certified means something slightly different here. But then again, it does work out with my feeling about the Americans, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, now that's my mouse. Let's see if I can do it. Oops. I'm good at this. All right, so it doesn't want to change. Oh, yes, it does. It's computer, you see. Okay, well, tonight I want to talk about getting yourself sorted out for chartership, because we are having some problems in people, in actual fact, applying too soon. And so, consequently, we have a situation now where if you've got an accredited degree and you've got 5 years relevant experience, you're then eligible to apply for chartership. That doesn't mean that you're ready. And one of the problems we have is that sponsors are not playing the game as well as they should do. Sponsors should be saying to you, yes, you're ready and I'm going to support you. As opposed to your company saying, you've got the 5 years in, get your application in. Because you've got a problem and it upsets people when they get turned down. You know, we try to mitigate this by, we don't say fail, we say defer. That doesn't scar your psyche like fail does. But nevertheless, the problem we have is we can have anything up to 15 or 20% deferred. And that's wrong. And the main reason it's wrong is the fact that people are applying when they're not ready. So we're working with companies and people who look after the training companies so that we can agree so-and-so is ready to apply. And when that happens, the chances of success are very high indeed. I've mentioned chartered scientist. And again, the situation quite simply is you've got to make a decision. Are you, and are you working as a practicing professional geologist? Or are you a geologist working with not as much geology in your work? Happens for quite a lot of people working in the contaminated land area. CSI is equivalent to CGeol, and I know most geologists say, well, I want CGeol, I don't want CSI. But make that decision. Don't apply for CGeol and find out you applied for the wrong one. The number of years relevant experience, well, again, you can look at the chart on that. Accredited degree in 5 years, accredited MSc in 4 years, PhD in 3 years, and various other combinations. If you're not sure, give me a call and I'll sort things out. Now comes the question, who's going to sponsor me? Normally we'd like to have 2 chartered geologists sponsor you. Those people should know your work, should know the quality of your work, and should know your professional standing. And they're supposed to put their names on the line, or the next on the line to say, I believe this person's ready. The problem I have is when people get turned down. Because then we send the application off for review, and then I end up having interesting discussions with sponsors. By the way, you told me that so-and-so was ready for chartership, but 4 chartered geologists say you're wrong. It becomes an interesting situation where we have, full and frank discussions. But the sponsors have got a very serious role to play, and you should make sure that they read the applications, make sure they know what they're doing. Final one there, have I got a mentor who can advise me? It's best if you can find somebody as a mentor who's not your line manager. Because the best description I have of a mentor is a critical friend who will say to you, hang on, it's about time you started doing some other work. Now, your line manager won't say that because he wants you to do the work he's going on. But the mentor will explain to you the development of your career and the amount of work you need to do in different areas. And that gives you power to go back to the company and say, listen, what's the chances of me getting involved in this, that, and the other? Right, I'll try again. Okay, the application. There's an application form you can get off the website, nice and simple, fill it all in. Within it, there's a professional report where we want you here to explain when, how, why, and where you develop the particular skills, experience, and competences that make you ready to be chartered. So basically, the professional board is saying, listen, this is me. This is how I came to where I am now. And I'm good. You know, don't be shy. Say it up front. I'm ready. Test me. We then ask you for up to 6 supporting documents. It's amazing how many people can't count. Not only that, it says select up to 6 documents that will show your particular fulfillment of criteria. It doesn't say dump huge reports from your company and defy the scrutineers to find out the relevance of them. You can put a big report in, but for goodness sake, put a cover sheet on it. Let's say, by the way, I wrote pages 33 and 34. I know there are 900 pages, but you probably like that for your library. But this is the bit that points to me. This is the bit I did, and this bit shows that I know X, Y, and Z. If you do that on all the documents, you got it home and dry. The documents don't have to be reports. We feel no. It can be a 3-dimensional ground model. It can be a couple of interpretive cross sections. They're there to demonstrate that you're using, in particular for the first 2 criteria, they're there to demonstrate you're using your geology, you understand geology, and consequently you're ready to go for chartership. Sponsor statements, 2 of them. I don't want a sponsor to say, oh, tick all the boxes, he's a nice lad, or woman, or whoever it is, who's a friend of mine. We want them to, in actual fact, spell out what they believe, in their professional opinion, your ability. It is important that they do that. We want chartered geologists to do it if possible, but we have sunk as low as chartered engineers. Never got quite as far as chartered environmentalists, but that's by the by. Because we want people who understand your work. You know, the reason that Chartered Geologist was developed was because people, largely working in the engineering industry, were writing geological reports, and they weren't allowed to sign them off because they weren't chartered, and they were signed off by civil engineers. And civil engineers couldn't spell geology, no matter about understanding it. Okay, so it's important that we need somebody to sponsor you, to recommend you, that understands your work. CPD record. It says that you should be doing CPD to a particular level every year, because the idea is that chartered geologist means that you are a professional who is maintaining their skills through CPD. You're keeping up to date and they're continuing to learn through CPD. The important word here is the D bit, development. CPD can be a whole slew of things. It can be you simply reading journals to extend your geological knowledge. If you can reading regulations and things like that to ensure that your particular skills match the projects you're dealing with. It can be courses of various kinds. Or in many instances, it's in actual fact learning in professional practice. If you sat down for 10 minutes once a month and wrote down what you'd learned in that month and how much time was involved in that, you'll be amazingly surprised about how much CPD of that kind you've done. And that's important. The unfortunate thing is a lot of people seem to think that CPD is about courses. Well, yes, in early parts of your career, it commonly is. But simply going to courses or going to lectures, unless it's structured, is not terribly useful. I'm an exploration geologist, or was. Went to a lecture on microtunneling. What I needed to know about microtunneling, you could write on the head of a pin and still leave room for the Lord's Prayer. But I could have written that down in my CPD record. But it's a pointless exercise. So what we want in the CPD is for you to look and talk to your line manager, wherever it is, what you plan to do in terms of learning and developing in the next year. And then record what you do and what you learn. And then at the end of the year, reflect on what you've actually achieved. You won't have done all you've planned, but you may have done some different things as well. But on the reflection, it will allow you then to suggest what you might do for the next year. That's the useful way of going about it. You know, we've had situations where I've had a situation where a scrutineer has said that a particular guy didn't do very much CPD because he's working in Dubai and you can't get CPD in Dubai. Absolute nonsense. You can read in Dubai, I think. As long as you read the right things, of course, you don't get jailed. But what they were saying was there weren't courses there because they misunderstood the situation. On the other end, last month we had an application where somebody put in that they'd done 1,700 hours of professional practice CPD. Well, 1,700 hours is a working year. So they've done nothing but learn all year. Their company must be very pleased that they've done the work. Okay, so think about that one. And the last one, get your sponsors to read the application. They fill in the form and they tick the box saying, yes, I've read the full application. But there's an awful lot of people that tell porkies. And I would say that something in the order of 40 or 50% of the sponsors do not read the full report. And then the candidate comes along and he gets knocked back. Not their fault. The sponsors haven't helped them. Right. So we're off. You're going to be talking to scrutineers. They're interested in what you've got to say because they want to talk to you about it. They're not looking to find out what you don't know. They're not looking for you to demonstrate that you know as much as they do. That's not the game. What they're looking to do is to find out what you know and how you've used it. And whether or not you've reached a particular level, which is the bar that we call chartership. So, catch their interest. You've got a presentation to make. So use that to talk about an example or examples of your work where you've looked at a problem and you've solved it. Or you've looked at a problem, you've collected the data and you've interpreted these data, and this is what it means. If you do that, you've got their interest. And the next thing you know, they'll be asking you questions about that. Which is perfect, because you know all about that. If you bore them, or you just give them an extended CV, they're going to start thinking of their own questions, and this can come out from anywhere. And when that happens, this is where you start stumbling. So you can control that interview by grasping their interest. Similarly with the CPD. Be clear about this plan, act, reflect cycle. I'm going to do this because X, Y, Z. All pretty important points. So what happens? You submit your application by the due date. That's an interesting one as well, because there's certainly at least 10% is the due date. They're still bouncing back to their student days when the dog ate the things and things of those lines. But application comes about true date. We check it for completeness. Are the two sponsors reports? Is there a fresh report? Is there an overview of the competences? Is there a CPD record? Are there several supporting documents? And then we send it off to two scrutineers. And we ask them if the documentation is sufficient for them to run an interview. The trouble that I've had in the past is many scrutineers don't get around to reading their applications until about a week before the interview. And then they start phoning me saying, oh, well, they haven't done this, they haven't done the other. Well, sorry, it's too late for them. But it makes a difference to you because they've not done the job properly. So I'm pushing them at the present time to do it correctly. I'm pushing them to read the application as soon as it comes in. And if it's not right, to let me know. Because there is the possibility if you've missed something out, I can ask you for it in time. Or I can say, no, hang on, it's not good enough at the present time. Put the application back in with these changes for the next situation. Because, again, my job is to make sure that you pass this bloody thing. That's what they pay me for. All right? The scrutineers are the miserable sorts. We also look at the business of conflict of interest. We ask you, we tell you who the scrutineers are going to be and who they work for. We tell the scrutineers who you are and who you work for, and we say, look, is there any likelihood of a conflict of interest? Have you sacked this guy recently? Or has he had an affair with your wife or something like that? But we try to ensure that it's a totally fair situation. So you're happy with the situation, they're happy with the situation. Then you have your interview and we get the results, and I think we can talk a bit further about that in a minute. Yeah. Excuse me, I just switch my phone off before I goes in trouble. The scrutineers have got the opportunity to offer one of three possibilities. One is defer. One is to accept, and one is to accept subject to. The straight accepts are wonderful. Again, I commonly use the description of the high jump in athletics as the bar for chartership. If you jump over the bar and get sailed across it very, very easily, simple accept. And there are people that do that and do that very well. And so consequently, at the end, when they get their indication that they've been accepted, they will come and get a little note saying, you did exceedingly well, blah, blah, blah. But there are a lot of candidates that scrape the bar with a bum and the bar bounces. If it falls off, they're deferred. If it stays on, they're accepted. But the difference between those two candidates is very, very small indeed. And because of that, what happens is we ask the scrutineers to write a report on the interview and feedback for the candidates. So the candidate has just made it and the candidate has just missed it, get virtually the same feedback. And that is, I think, quite an important thing to realise. Accept subject to is if you've just gone off at a tangent for some reason, the scrutineers have picked it up and they know you've got particular reports back at work that you could easily submit which would fulfill a particular criterion. And they would then say, okay, you've got 4 weeks to submit this. And if they're submitted and we accept it, then you'll go through. That's an interesting spelling, isn't it? The results. What happens is that the recommendations go to the Chartership Committee and the accepts then are sent on to Council, who then elect you. And generally, as I say here, it all takes about 3 months. So people who apply, for example, for September the 9th, this year will be, if they're successful, will be chartered in November. So we try and keep that particular time pretty short. And the good thing is then we can give you feedback so that if there's just one or two small problems, you can get your application in quickly for the next time. But again, I'm looking for everybody to be successful. To be fair, the Scrutineer is looking for everybody to be successful. But you need to look and focus your application on your geological skills. Lots of guys have got job descriptions as geotechnical engineer. Fine, but I don't want you to explain in an application for Chartered Geologist how good a geotechnical engineer you are. I want to know about your geological skills and your geological competences. So focus. Right. Well, I'll leave it there on the application side of things, but just to give you a little bit more information. About 8 months ago, the Society noticed that we weren't getting very many applications from the oil and gas business and from the minerals mining business or from academia. And consequently, we had a look and we noticed that there were quite a large number of people in pretty senior positions who weren't chartered. So we specifically set up a new route for people with more than 20 years experience. The idea being that if they work for over 20 years, they're in a senior position with a company who held that job for a while, it's unlikely that their geological skills are not going to be very good. And the idea was to bring those people in, and they would then act as role models in their industry. And we've been very successful in that. There's over 40 that have come in the last 6 months. And just to give you one example, the chief geologist from BP applied. And we asked him why he'd applied, other than the fact we twisted his arm. And he said he had a very interesting experience because, as you know, BP had a very interesting experience in Macondo in the Gulf of Mexico. Cost a lot of money. He said after that, he found himself in a room with 20 American lawyers. And they said to him, right, Dr. Daly, who said you're competent to make those decisions? And he said, well, my company, because they've trained me. No, you don't understand it. Who has peer assessed you? Has your professional status been looked at by the community? He said, oh, no. But you then get a petroleum engineer coming in and things like that. And what are your professional qualifications? Well, I'm a chartered professional engineer. I'm a chartered this, that, and the other. You then go to court. Well, the other guy lays out their professional qualifications. And the geologist comes along. What professional qualifications do you got? Well, I don't really have any. Not good. Doesn't help. So these guys, I'm hoping, are going to stand up and start pushing people in their companies to join. And at the present time, it seems to be working. Many more applications are coming from the mining industry, mainly because about 20 years ago, there was a nickel boom in Australia, and there was an awful lot of fiddling, shall we say, going on resources and reserves. And so the Australians invented a reserves and resources reporting code. It's called JORC. And the South Africans followed them. And then a few years ago, I don't know if you remember Bre-X. Have you heard of Bre-X? There's a gold scandal in Indonesia where they've been reporting millions of ounces of gold in these properties just to move these shares all over the place. And it was a total fraud. And so the Canadians have brought in National Instrument 43101 to look after that. We have now brought in a pan-European code to do the same sort of thing. So far, we haven't had that scandal, but you know, it's only that far away. And certainly, if you read the newspapers about fracking, for example, one of those interesting things in the newspapers where the chairman of iGas stands up and say, we've just got 550 billion cubic meters of gas in resource, or no, he said in reserve. Absolute nonsense. That's blatant stock manipulation. He ought to go to jail for that. He didn't know the difference between reserves and resources. All right? Professionals need to deal with that. So things are working. The universities, interesting enough, the master's courses are now applying to become accredited, and people teaching on those master's courses are starting to become chartered. Interesting. You know, anybody who's teaching on an MSc course, which is a vocational MSc course, Engineering Geology, Hydrogeology, you name it, that doesn't have a professional qualification, I'm not really sure that they ought to be teaching. It's a throwback, I guess, to the old days of education in universities. I know when I started teaching university, you didn't need a teaching qualification. You just turned up. What the hell, go on with it? But about 10 years ago, they've now decided that university lecturers ought to have a teaching qualification. Sounds about reasonable to me, but it didn't sound like that at the time. Okay, what else have I got to say? Yeah, the people working in North America said that when they're professional geologists, their professional organisation gives them a logo to use on the reports or on the letters. So, Chartered Geologist is about to get theirs. It's likely to be situated anytime soon, so that's rather nice, isn't it? You'll be able to stamp it on your Christmas cards and the whole thing. Good news. We've also advertised for mentors, and if, for example, you work in a company where you can't find a mentor, if you apply to the Society, we can give you a list of people working in the general area that you're working in who've offered to help. And this is starting to work. We used to just give some names to regional groups. The regional groups weren't too happy about being lumbered with this. But we've now advertised for mentors, and we've got a decent number of them available. So if you're working for a small outfit where you're perhaps only the first geologist, or there's only 2 geologists or something like that, there isn't somebody to help you, then of course apply to the Society and we can help out. And finally, a plea. If you know anybody who has been chartered for a number of years or has got a lot of experience and then has just become chartered, we're looking for people to help as scrutineers or as people who will advise applicants. Looking around the room, there only seems to be a couple of people whose birth certificates are sufficiently ancient as to allow them to do that. Whether or not they're chartered, I don't know. I might find out later. But get the message back into your employment that we're looking for your senior people to become chartered in the first instance, but if they are chartered, to help out with scrutineering. We'll only ask them to do it maybe once a year, if we've got the right kind of candidates. I think that's me, if I remember rightly. It is. So I don't know what you want to do, whether I should answer questions now or wait till the end. Wait till the end? Okay. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
Well, hi everybody, I'm Catherine Isherwood, and I went through all this process just last year. I got chartered in September, and so it's all fairly fresh in my mind, and my aim here really is to give you a bit of an idea of what it's like from underneath and to work your way through the system, and some of the things that you need to think about that aren't immediately obvious, I suppose. Bill's already mentioned some of them, but I'll probably talk about them again just because it sort of points that it's kind of good to emphasise a bit. So a little bit of a sketch of what I'm going to talk about, sort of where to start. A brief run through the process, which Bill's obviously been through in a bit more depth than that, and then some of the things to think about, which is kind of, I suppose, the focus of what I want to talk about just now. The way to start, it's complicated in many ways. It's not just about your education. That's the easy bit. You know, have you got the relevant sort of degree? Are you working in geology or in a science discipline? What's your background like? And how does that tie in with the requirements? And then it's like, what's your job doing? What sort of experience have you got? What are you working in now? Are you doing all the same sorts of things? Are you just always designing foundations or always doing slope stability assessments? Because if you are, you maybe need to try and do something else as well to give you a bit more breadth of experience to cover off some of the other competencies that you need to demonstrate. And that for me was an issue because I was working in an environmental consultancy rather than a geological one. And I spent most of my life doing peat stability assessments, which are all well and good, but it's only one thing. And I needed to broaden that really to get a bit more experience in other geological areas to demonstrate that I could do real geology as well as pretend geology like peat. And one of the things actually that the new forms ask for is your area of expertise. You're asked to select, I think, up to 3 areas of expertise. And that gave me a real headache. It doesn't seem like a really nasty question, but it's like, well, how do you pin it down? And you've got geologists quite often end up working in lots of different areas. So you might do bits of contaminated land work, you might do ground investigations, you might do slope stability, you might do bits of water management, surface and groundwater management. They don't fit neatly in one box. So you might need to think, okay, how would I define my area of expertise? Am I principally a quarrying and mining geologist, or am I principally a contaminated land geologist, or what? And then do you have several different areas of expertise that you think are all important? And then how do you rank those? It's worth having at the back of your mind and talking to other people about, you know, how would they define you as a geological scientist? The way to start thing, for me, looking at the application form, the first time I looked at it, I had a hairy fit, and I thought, I'm never going to be able to do this. I just can't. And then I went away and did something else, and came back to it about 2 years later, I think, and looked at it again, and it wasn't that bad the second time. I find blank pieces of paper scary, always have done. So one of the things I ended up doing was filling in the easy bits, like the educational background and who I currently work for. That's fairly obvious. The experience bit can be more tricky because it's a bit like writing CVs. A lot of people find it very hard to sell themselves. So it's very important to be realistic and try and be objective. This is, again, where talking to other people is very helpful. About your experience, what you do, what you've done, and what it amounts to. And try and look at it in a slightly different way. So, like, what skills have you learned by doing your peat stability assessments for the last 14 years? You know, what else has that taught you? Or yeah, it's things like that. It's trying to be a little bit creative, really, I suppose, in the way you look at your experience. It's not all just the same thing day in, day out. But you also do need to be realistic. Bill's already mentioned about needing to be ready to be chartered. That's very important. And you need to feel that in yourself. It doesn't matter how many people tell you, yeah, you're fine, it's going to be wonderful. If you don't feel ready, then you're going to get really worked up and screwed up about it. And you need to feel in yourself that you think this is right for you now. But equally, you need to work out how to get there. So if you think, you know, I'm on the way, but I haven't quite got there yet because I've got this gap in my experience, how do we work out how to fill in that gap? Maybe you need to talk to your line manager about trying to do a different piece of work. Maybe you need to change jobs. It worked for me. It's a little bit drastic, but it is one way. But really, you're talking to other people about the process, people who've been through chartership, preferably fairly recently, because they'll remember it better, but also other people who are going through the process. And it doesn't have to be the same with the same institution. I talked to lots of people who are applying for chartership with SciWem or with the ICE, and a lot of the process is the same. And it can be very interesting to bounce ideas around and have those conversations. So the process, Bill's already talked about this a lot, but there's the 7 competences that you have to demonstrate. Again, some of those tend to be very easy. Communicating is often fairly straightforward. Most of us have to write reports in our jobs, and you learn how to write a report by doing it and by sometimes getting it shredded by somebody else and being told to go away and rewrite it. But it's quite easy to demonstrate that you can write something because you've got reports that you've written. Some of them are quite hard to document in writing. So like, you can say that you follow good health and safety practice, but it's actually quite hard to demonstrate that per se, if you like. So I think that's something that often gets explored more in the interview. But it's often good to have thought about how you do that. For example, do you have a first aid qualification? Do you work on sites where you need to wear PPE and follow instructions? That's all good health and safety. The professional report that Bill's already mentioned is, I suppose, a bit like an essay. This is me. This is what I've learned. How I demonstrate that I can do these things, if you like. It needs to be signed off by people. And the signatories for mine were all over the country, and some of them were academics who were notoriously absent-minded. So I was actually quite worried about getting the various pages of my professional report back with the right signatures in the right places in time to submit the whole thing. Don't leave it to the last minute because it's not worth it. You'll tear your hair out and drive everybody around the bend. Yeah, that was a little bit scary. But we got there in the end. And again, the same with the sponsors' reports. Bill's already mentioned about sponsors. I ended up having 3, which is probably fairly unusual, but that's because in the job where I built up most of my experience, I wasn't actually working with a chartered geologist at all. It was a big company, and the company had chartered geologists on the staff. There just weren't any in my office, so I wasn't working with them ever. And so they would have been very happy to support me, but they didn't have any knowledge of my work. And it's a bit of a problem, I think, for quite a lot of people. And then I changed jobs, but I was only there for a year before I put in my application. Well, my line manager is a chartered geologist, and she was very happy to sponsor me. But they're supposed to know you for 3 years. So it's sort of, well, what do I do? Well, I did end up actually having a chartered environmentalist as one of my sponsors. I did ask, and they said it was okay. And the other one was a chartered scientist and a chartered chemist. So he ticked the box. So I ended up having 3. And so trying to get 3 people to write sponsor statements and get me the paperwork and things, again, is an extra layer of complication. But if in doubt, ask and try and get around that problem as far in advance as you can, really, so that you can start trying to find people, or if necessary, building up a relationship with somebody who you don't necessarily work with, so that they can get an understanding of your work, so they're happy to act as a sponsor when it comes to the time that you need them. The time scale is the sort of thing ticking away at the back of your mind all the way through this. The Society is very good about putting up the dates on the website, so that you've got the submission date and the interview date, and then the date of the council election process, assuming you get that far. At the back of my mind, I did have this thing: if people hadn't sent back my professional report in time, that it wasn't the end of the world if I missed that deadline, because I could always put it in for the next one. So it gave me another 3 months, if you like. It depends a little bit if you want or need to go for the interview that's closest to where you live. I ended up going down to Birmingham because the dates worked for me, and actually that was quite good. in a lot of ways. I had 2 scrutineers who I'd never met before. And yeah, so there wasn't the conflict of interest potential, which is also good. So from that point of view, the timescale both is and isn't a constraint. I think it's only a constraint if you make it be, or if somebody imposes that on you from the outside. So like if your employer says, you must be chartered by this date, or you must get your application in by that date, that then would become potentially more tricky, I suppose. But it's something to keep at the back of your mind and make sure you give yourself enough time to get everything in place. So I've just talked about the interview dates and locations. Does it matter if you have your interview in London, or does it have to be in Glasgow or in Edinburgh? Often, the places where the interviews are held, they're typically pretty accessible. I ended up going down to Birmingham just for the day, and yes, I had to get the first train that left in the morning at 5:30, which wasn't the most friendly thing in the world, but it didn't kill me. Who needs to sign things? So who are your sponsors? Where are your sponsors? Who do you need to sign your professional report? Can you contact them? Where are they based? How reliable are they? And are they going to lose your paperwork and make you do it all over again? But crucially, you need time to talk things through with people. I was very lucky in that one of my sponsors was also very happy to act as a mentor. He's done this for lots of other people and is very supportive and very realistic, actually. He was very helpful about reading through the paperwork and suggesting things that could be better, places where I possibly got the balance a bit wrong and undersold myself, or, I don't know, talked about something slightly irrelevant. So it's a case of go away, tinker with it, try and keep it within the word limit. But make sure you have time to talk it through with people, with a mentor, with friends, with anybody who's prepared to listen. You'll probably build more silly by the end, but it's worth it. Supporting documents, Bill's already mentioned about how important it is to select them. I found this actually very complicated because you end up writing so much in the consultancy world, which is where I've got all my work experience. I've got 14 different examples of this sort of work and 17 of that kind of work. Which one is best? Well, it doesn't actually have to be best. Make sure it's one that you've written or you've written the right bits of. With some of them, I actually chose a short one because it demonstrated all the things I needed it to demonstrate in comparatively few pages. There was one which was a fairly epic document, but I didn't send all of it. I cut it down as brutally as I could and apologised to my scrutineers for the amount of paperwork I sent them. But it needed some of it just to explain the thought processes as to how the assessment was done. So I didn't really feel I could take out more without making it meaningless. But again, if you're worried about that, talk to people. They need to be relevant and they need to demonstrate, to show your skills in a particular area. So it can be documents that other people have helped write or have written parts of, or where you've only written a little bit of it. But if that's the case, make it clear. Because they want to know what you've done and what your skill set is. And a scrutineer once said to me, please remember that scrutineers are volunteers. They do this in their own time. They're mostly very busy people with an awful lot to do, and they're trying to do this in their free time, in evenings and weekends and lunchtimes and things. Please try not to submerge them. And there is a maximum of 6 documents. It's a maximum, not a target. You don't have to send 6 supporting documents. If you only need 3, only send 3. And then once you've sent it all off, that to me was actually the scariest bit. You stick it all in the envelope and you seal it up and you take it down to the post office and then you think, oh God, did I remember to put that bit in? Well, I obviously did because it didn't come back. It's worth giving a bit of thought to what you're going to do your presentation on. It's 15 minutes. It varies in its formality, I think, depending on who the scrutineers are. Mine ended up being much more of a conversation actually than a sort of formal stand-up presentation. It could be a case study. It could be about more than one project, but if you're going to do it about that sort of thing, what sort of project do you think you can talk about for 15 minutes if it's going to be a formal presentation? How does it help to show off your skill set? remember that one of the things that they're looking for is how well you communicate orally in that sort of formal or semi-formal setting. But to me, the real bottom line is make sure it's a project that you're really happy that you understand. Because you need to be able to explain it, you need to be able to talk about it. They will ask you questions, particularly if you've made it interesting. They'll want to ask you more about it. I ended up talking about my master's dissertation, which I've been writing about the same time as I was doing my chartership application. And that was fine because I just spent a year and a half working on it and doing all the analysis and writing the thing. So I was kind of immersed in the whole thing anyway. And it meant that it was a really good topic to have quite an in-depth discussion about. And there were lots of interesting things that came out of it and lots of open-ended questions and more things that if I had the time, I would love to go away and look into. Well, not everybody's going to have a master's dissertation just sitting there waiting to use. But you will have work reports or interesting projects that you've been doing that can give rise to an interesting conversation. So it's worth thinking about this in advance and not leaving it too last minute, especially if you're like me. I'm not very good at last minute. And generally, the scrutineers want to help you. They're not trying to catch you out. They'll try and guide you towards something to help you towards a piece of information that they need from you. There was one bit of the conversation where in my interview where they were very much asking about particular elements of work. I was like, okay, there's obviously something that they need me to say about this. I didn't know what it was, but eventually I obviously said something that worked, and then the conversation moved direction. It's like, okay, I've obviously ticked that box then. That's quite a nice feeling, because you think, I've done that bit, I've covered that one off, it's fine. If they weren't happy, they'd still be asking about it. And that was quite clear that they were trying to help me get the information that they needed to say, yes, she knows about this. So just keep that at the back of your mind. It might be scary and intimidating in some ways. I certainly was scared witless, and I wished I hadn't had my lunch before I went in because it felt like I'd been eating lead. But actually, once I got going, you kind of get into it and you calm down and you can enjoy it a little bit more. At least try to. Try not to fall over now. So yeah, that's the main thing, is that they're trying to help you get where you need to be. And I think that's me. There's my email address on there. I'm quite happy to answer questions about what I went through and how it worked for me. Feel free to contact me if you want to bounce ideas around. And thank you.
Catherine made a couple of interesting points, actually. She made a lot of interesting points, but a particular one that is worth emphasising is this business about expertise. You put up to 3 expertises on the application form. The reason for that is to allow me to select scrutineers that fit the area that you work in. Okay? Taking that further, though, in criterion 7, your competence in the area that you're working in, we are chartering people as geologists who are competent and have demonstrated their competence in a particular area. So we want to know if you know your boundaries. Where, if you're asked to do work, you would say, no, I can't, because I don't have that expertise. I will need supervision, or I'll need further training. All right? Just because you're a chartered geologist doesn't mean you can sign off any old report. You sign off things where you are competent. And of course, as your career develops, so you get competent in more areas. That's really all I would add. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll open the floor to some questions now, and if for those online, just feel free to type a question in, and we'll get to answering all the questions you have about chartership. Anyone from the room? Okay, so anyone online, any questions? Do we have any typed in? Not yet.
Remember, folks, for your interview, the important thing is to walk in there confident. This is me. I've got it. I'm ready. I'm confident. Right? So the same thing goes here. Be confident. Ask the question. You know, you may think, oh, I really shouldn't ask that question because it might sound silly. But there's probably about 3 other people thinking the same thing. The only stupid question is the one you don't ask.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
If you've got experience teaching geology, would that be able to be used for your application as certificate if you're out there in effect doing geology, but then teaching of it fit into the normal working category?
Okay, so you're talking about if you are teaching a working teaching geologist, then you could be chartered as a geologist whose expertise is in education. Okay, but what you're looking for is to be chartered for a particular expertise. Now, the education teaching side of it you may use as part of your CPD, for example, but it may not be the expertise that you're looking for to be chartered in. But should it be, and I would certainly wish more teachers to come forward and apply for chartership, because come on, let's face it, they are professionals, be they tertiary education people or be they secondary education people. They are professional geologists who have got education as their expertise. So I don't know if that answers your question, but partway there maybe.
During your presentation, use age as best case studies that are completely separate from your application, with different case studies, or verify the projects you use as supporting documents, or just describe them.
Commonly, it's the question. I'm talking to online people. The question here is, for the presentation, should the presentation be about something that is not in your application, in other words, not one of the supporting documents? The norm would be no. It would be your best supporting document that really shows you off to the best. Because the object of the exercise in the interview is for you to boast and say, listen, this is me and I'm good. Charter me. It's not messing about.
Just to follow up on that, my presentation was also one of my supporting documents. Obviously, the slant was slightly different because you're able to discuss things differently when you're doing it in presentation format. But yeah, I submitted part of my dissertation report as one of my 6 supporting documents, and then I also talked about it because it had some very interesting questions, and it was a good opportunity for me to show off a piece of work that I'd basically done all of, and say, look, isn't this fun? Because I was also enjoying doing it. But yeah, if you've really selected your supporting documents to be the ones that show you off well, then chances are one of those is also going to be a good thing for you to do your presentation on. I don't think it has to be, but it's not ruled out by being a supporting document.
Well, the nice thing is, you see, that if a particular piece of work has left some questions hanging, then you've got 2 experienced people in your area sitting there, and you can turn the thing around to them and say, well, what do you think ought to happen? Develops the conversations very nicely. What you don't want to do is to just give your CV toehold by toehold. It'll bore them rigid, and that's the last thing that they're interested in. Get them on your side. That's the game.
So hopefully the supporting document can be taken from your period of education, can they, or not?
The norm would be not, unless it's like an MSc project. It's the documents have got to be professional documents. Okay, now the MSc project would be a professional document, But the last thing a scrutineer wants to do is to have, lying on his desk, a 400-page MSc thesis. That's going to choke him off, and it's not going to be on your side. The same thing with a PhD. You know, pick the bits that point at the skills that you've developed. Yeah, this is how I produce ground models, and this is one I produced, and this is one I tested, blah, blah.
Yeah, what I submitted for my supporting document was extracts. So it was kind of key bits that showed off my expertise as a hydrogeologist, because that was what my MSc was in. But I was also writing it at the same time as my application. The dissertation got handed in August of last year, because I was doing the master's part-time whilst working. So it was also very recent and relevant. So I wouldn't have given in something from when I was a full-time student, umpteen years ago, because that's kind of history now. It's part of my academic background, but it's not really part of my professional experience.
That's the thing, the difference between academic background and professional experience and professional. Not at undergraduate level, I wouldn't have said. But postgraduate level, I think that could very well be, if it's pointed, it could very well be a useful piece of information. Last 5 years, I suppose. Yeah. Sounds like you've got something in mind.
Any other questions from the room so far?
Have you found that previous applicants who have worked for geotechnical contractors had difficulties coming up with the required amount of geological expertise? I'm just thinking from myself that in the field work and planning, probably a bit more scant on the modelling and interpretation. It's something that's come across quite commonly.
Yes, it has been a difficulty. People doing SI work and things like that, they found it difficult because they don't write reports. And a number of them have said, well, the problem is I go on site and I'm told to record this or to supervise the other. That's fine, but you could then say, well, just because you went on site doesn't mean you switch your brain off. Have you thought about interpreting the geology in that particular area outside of what you've got to produce for your work? And if you do that and get that in your field notebook, you could present that as, this is my model, which isn't being sent to the client, but it's my understanding and my use of my geology in underlying things.
So it doesn't need to be an official document?
Indeed not, no. It can be anything that points out your use of geoscience. Question online, is it?
Okay, we'll try some questions online, yes. Sorry, we're crowding around the microphone here. Okay, we have a question. Is PowerPoint presentation or printouts preferred for the interview?
I don't think there's an overt preference. Certainly, I wasn't told it must be done this way or that way. I did mine as a PowerPoint presentation because one of the things I wanted to talk about was results in graph form and conceptual models of things, and I wanted to be able to show those on a reasonably big scale and point out things. But I also had paper copies which I gave to my scrutineers in case they wanted to take them away for later. But I think if you turned up and wanted to scribble on bits of paper and do it that way, then there's nothing to stop you. I did have to take my own laptop to run the presentation on, so I guess if you wanted to use a whiteboard or a flip chart, you might have to take your own with you.
No, you don't have to bring it with you. Tell us that you want it. Very simple. But I mean, so the norm is a PowerPoint, because there's only 3 of you, the 2 scrutineers and yourself in the room, and to sit around a screen, it isn't difficult to see what's going on. But the other thing is that if you've got a large longitudinal cross-section or a new map of an area that you develop where you're sorting out all problems on, bring that along. Because the best thing in the world is to have that laid on a table and have the two scrutineers and yourself crawling all over it, pointing out things and discussing it. The object of the exercise is to get the message through that you know what you're doing and you've got particular competences. And you know, the scrutineers are very flexible in how they operate with you. And Catherine made a point. It should be an enjoyable experience. Believe that, you believe in it. Yeah.
Actually, I did enjoy mine once I got in there and calmed down a bit.
Yeah, it should. I mean, a large number of people have come out and have said to me, I enjoyed that.
Yeah. I didn't enjoy the anticipation. That was awful.
Well, that's the problem. But enjoy it, because you are selling yourself. And this is you who believes that you are ready to be a chartered professional. Great. So go in the first instance with confidence, and then just blow them away.
Great. The next question we have from online is, how do you prove experience that was gained abroad? Is there an issue, or I take it?
There isn't really an issue. If you're working abroad and you claim that particular piece of work that you did while you were there fulfilled a particular aspect of a criterion, then of course you've got that in your professional report and it's signed off by the person you did the work for. So again, no problem.
Great. Another question about overseas, but this is someone who has a difficulty because there are no chartered geologists in their company and they're working abroad. So can we give advice on who can sponsor them? Working for a Canadian company? Working for a Canadian company. If they're working for a Canadian company, there's absolutely no problem, because their company will have professional geologists. PGO. I'm afraid that's the problem. There are no chartered geologists.
No,
in this
but it does say here who can sponsor the Canadian PGOs.
Canadian PGOs. We're working with the Canadians to try and get a reciprocity agreement where that PGO and CGeol are considered to be at the same level. The Canadians have been a bit precious about it, but we're working on it.
And also, is it a necessity that your sponsors have known you for 3 years? Is that set in stone?
We obviously prefer it, but there's absolutely no question about the fact that this can't happen in a number of instances, and Catherine has proved that in her application. What the sponsors were looking for are people to give a professional opinion of your work and your professional standing. And if somebody has known you and your work for 3 years, then it's likely they've got a pretty fair grip of it. But it may very well be, if you're working closely with a line manager or something like that, if you've only known them for 12 months or so, they may very well know the quality of your work and are willing to stand for you. And if there is a problem like that, just give me a call and let's talk about it. And there isn't a problem we can't solve. We have problems with confidentiality in some instances, the oil boys in particular, because they believe they're special, and of course they're moving huge amounts of money around. To give you an example, the chief geologist for BP, when I was talking about his work, I said, you know, what's your responsibilities? And he said, I manage a $4 billion a year research exploration program. I shouldn't be in the same room as you, but you know, don't worry about that particularly.
And someone else has asked about Greek companies, and they've been working here for 10 years abroad. Is there any issue with that? Not really. We have several Greek chartered geologists. The Society's got chartered geologists all over the world. We have done interviews in New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Africa, Canada, United States, Yukon Territory. We try to sort things. Chile is another one. We try to sort out things wherever we go.
At the present time, we've had a number of people Greeks who came to the UK, got qualifications and went back to Greece and have come back and have become chartered with us. And again, if somebody in Greece has got a problem, there's a couple of people there, chartered geologists there, who are willing to act as mentors.
I suspect part of this problem this chap has is your sponsors have to be chartered geologists or preferred to be chartered geologists, chartered scientists, QA/accepts, other equivalents. The people who sign off confirming that your supporting documents are representative of your experience, do they have to be chartered geologists?
No, they'd have to be a line manager. And again, we've got to recognise the fact that living in different countries, working in different environments, may very well not put you in contact with several chartered geologists. So if you have a situation where there aren't chartered geologists, there's only one, well, talk to me about possibilities of who else we can use. We've already talked about the PGOs in Canada. We talked about IMM people in Australia. There is no problem that we can't solve. All right? The object of the exercise is to make sure that if you are ready and are fully qualified to be chartered, then you can become chartered. We're not trying to stop anything. And these rules, if you want, are no more than best practice. And as far as I'm concerned, rules are there to be broken. I'm quite happy to break rules, as long as we know that you've been supported correctly, that's all.
Okay. Any more questions from the floor? Has anything else occurred to anyone?
Yeah, just regarding getting bits of your professional report signed off by your employers. One of the companies I work for 6 years no longer exists. So I'm being likely to get that bit signed off. Can you feel that bit out, or?
Just for the benefit of the microphone and for those online, the question is about getting items signed off from a company that might not exist anymore, and how we might fix that.
Okay, the company might not exist anymore, but it's highly likely that the guys working for it have moved on to other companies. So if you're able to find them, by all means find them. But don't just leave anything out. If there is a 4 or 5 years in your experience where it should have been signed off, but this outfit went bump and the guys left the profession or something like that, well, in actual fact, write to us and tell us this is the problem in this particular patch of your experience. And we can work around it.
Yeah, just to follow up on that one of my colleagues is a chartered geologist, and she was unable to get into contact with one of her former employers. I'm not quite sure what the reason was now, but in her professional report, it just had a note to say that she'd been unable to contact this person. It was a fairly short period of experience, so in the balance of things, it wasn't that crucial. But it's not an insurmountable problem.
And the scrutineers can then talk about that particular patch of time and the things that you learned at that time, and satisfy themselves in the interview that you fulfil those requirements.
All right. Any further queries from online as well as the room? I think that's everything. Okay, well, I'd just like to say thank you for a very comprehensive talk from Bill and from Catherine. And yeah, on that point, please feel free just to contact us if there are any issues. If you're, even as Catherine said, she hit the nail on the head, discussing things with, from my personal experience, I was quite fortunate. I knew quite a few people that had been through the process and people that could give advice. But if you are struggling to get in contact with folk, please just email us. Our contact details are on the website. It's not a problem at all. We can work around it and sort something out for you. So I think that wraps things up for this part of the talk. I think we're going to stop recording at this point. So thank you for those who have attended online, and we're going to have our AGM from now on. Thank you very much.
My card, grab one, contact me anytime.
Thank you.